Hi, this is Peter Hans, and welcome to this week's episode of Between Two Chains. Today, I'm joined by frequent guest, Arca CIO and co-founder Jeff Dorman. We talk about the state of the market right now, and frankly, it's pretty slow. But we talk about a lot of the reasons why and make comparisons to this market and what it looked like in 2019 before things really took off in 2020 and 2021. We talk about a lot of the building that's going on in infrastructure right now behind the scenes, the regulatory environment, the current trading outlook and environment, what other fund managers are thinking. And then, of course, we get into a little bit of Little League softball and baseball at the end of the show. So I hope you enjoy. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye. This commentary is not intended to be investment advice, investment research, or recommendation. Please consult your investment professional for your own circumstances. Right. Hello, this is Peter Hans, and welcome to this week's episode of Between Two Chains. In a lot of ways, Jeff, it's been a fast start to the year. In that, I'm kind of shocked that I turn around and it's already May 2nd. But at the, same time, I don't feel like, a whole hell of a lot is going on right now in the market. It's just, somewhat slow, and that's better than fast and straight down. But there's just not a lot going on right now. I don't know from your seat what you're seeing or what you think about it, outside of the banking crisis, of course.
Yeah, I mean, definitely slow. April was slow. There's no question. There was less going on. Obviously, you had the Ethereum, Chappella upgrade, which was a big deal. Outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot of, crypto specific news in April. But, let's not take away from the fact that we're, only 5 months removed from FTX and, 2 months removed from bank failures and Bitcoin exploding higher. I mean, there's been a lot going on in the last 6 months, and I tend to try to look over 3 and 6 and 9 month periods rather than 1 month for that
Mm-hmm.
reason, right? Because it definitely tells a better story. But yeah, I mean, we had an explosion in the first quarter, and we kind of just held those gains in April. Didn't really lose them, just didn't really go forward, and there just wasn't a lot of real newsworthy events driving market prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not even so much talking about performance, because you can't just keep going higher forever. Like, you need to take some breathers and fundamentals. And I think obviously the move higher overall in the market in March was very much driven by um, macro and what we saw with kind of systemic failures in regional banks domestically. But right now it's just, there doesn't seem we're just kind of pausing, right? And I think the regulatory environment in the U.S. is playing somewhat of a factor in that. But you do have events like we just got through with consensus, and I think the overall vibe there was largely very positive and exciting, at least long term. I've talked to a handful of people on the heels of it, and it just depends on what your perspective is. Some are like, it was good. It was good to get a good feel of it, but we're still, a while away from having, real commercial success and real kind of near term growth. And then others are like, this reaffirmed my belief in the overall ecosystem, and there's a lot of building going on. It's just kind of happening behind the scenes, and it's taking longer. So, um, you know, maybe that's nothing new, and that people you would expect there to be kind of growth and building, and I don't know, you wouldn't expect there to be any like major commercial launch, given what's given the regulatory uncertainty, but
I think
it just kind of seems like we're waiting.
Yeah, I mean, you look, you have personally built and run several startups before Arca as well, and you know that, there are times in the startup industries and startup companies where you're working a mile a minute and it feels like you're pushing, new code or new products out every week. And there's times where it's like you look back over 6 months, be like, well, all we really did was clean up a lot, but we didn't really make a lot of forward progress. And I think
Hmm.
in most, let's say you're an investor in a private startup, right? There's times when you're probably getting update emails every couple of weeks and really on the pulse of what your founders are doing. And there's times when you probably only get an update like once every 3 months and once every 6 months because it's just kind of slow. I think with digital assets, because you have public prices, because you have so much media attention, because you have volatility, it sort of pressures you into thinking that there should be something going on at all times, and sometimes it's just not the case. And I think, right now, as you said, it is a lot of building. It's a lot of cleaning up. For those developers, you hear the term technical debt. Cleaning up some code, cleaning up
Hmm.
some things that maybe got left behind in a bull market need to be. There's a lot of that going on right now. Both here at Arca, we look at some of our early stage venture portfolio companies. We look at some of the NFT projects we've backed. We look at some of the more liquid projects, and the it's a very similar response when we talk to teams and founders right now, which is heads down building, but there's only so much you can do. Certainly here in the U.S. around an uncertain regulatory environment, there's a lot of teams with movement to Europe and Asia. But there's just hasn't been a lot of new product pushes or new developments. I think the Ethereum Chapella upgrade, obviously for those who don't know, kind of the final state of the transition from proof of work to proof of stake, that allowed for ETH staking withdrawals to be liquid, and as a result, we've seen an increase in the ETH staking rate. That's a huge milestone for Ethereum, for the Ethereum community. And when something that big and that important kind of comes and goes, then you sit back like, what's next? And sometimes it might be 3 or 4 months till you get something of that magnitude coming to the market.
Yeah, and I think that's a good analogy with technical debt. And I think if you look at 2020, 2021, certainly a lot of the buzz and movement in the market was just kind of what's the next theme, right? And it was just kind of rotation, right? You had obviously first you had kind of Bitcoin and ETH move, then you had, oh, everything's about DeFi, then everything's about NFTs, then everything's about, gaming or whatever kind of the next, hot play was. And then, that all kind of turned and reversed with the macro environment. And now it just kind of seems like, those have, come and gone, and not to say they won't come back, because I think they will come back when it's more about actual building and delivery than hype. But I think you're right. It is a lot more about infrastructure, scalability, right? How can you make everything more scalable for what will be a future of commercial applications.
Yeah, and sometimes you are seeing progress without noticing that progress. Like, there are some people probably who listen and watch this who maybe actually transact in digital assets once or twice a year, and there's others who do it, twice a week. If you do it probably every month or every couple of months, you will notice it is getting easier. It is getting faster. It is getting the UIs are getting better. The wallets are getting better, and there are little improvements going on. It's just not the ones that the media is salivating over to write a story about. But you're seeing progress. Even Bitcoin transactions, for example. Bitcoin has been uninteresting for most of the last 3 years, up until a few months ago when you started to get US CDS blowing out and the banking crisis and everything that's been happening here in the first 4 months of this year. In fact, I saw Bitcoin was up for the first 4 months of this year in price. That was the first time that's happened since 2013. So Bitcoin has definitely been a more interesting story than the rest of the market, and sometimes that swallows the market, right? Because again, Bitcoin hasn't been the story for most of the last 3 to 4 years, and now all of a sudden it is, and that sort of swallows up some of the other things. But even with Bitcoin, transactions are at all-time highs, largely because of some more developments on ordinals, on the Bitcoin blockchain. So there's little things that maybe haven't necessarily caught the world's attention yet, but are increasing fundamentals, increasing usage, increasing price even a little bit, just at a slower kind of, more traditionally normal pace than a crypto pace that we're used to.
Yeah, and I guess one thing we have seen over the past couple of weeks is gas prices on Ethereum are just crazy right now, and there's a little bit of a mem coin boom, which boom
Boom. Yeah.
boom. Yeah, it's tough to say.
Yeah.
So which ultimately I don't think is very good for the space. I mean, it's definitely not good for the regulatory narrative. But I don't know. People are bored. I guess they need something to do, but it's not going to end well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't spend a ton of time looking at the meme coins in terms of investing, but I think they are interesting for a few reasons. One of which you just touched on, right? The first is it does generate a lot of transactions, and it does make Ethereum pretty deflationary, right? I mean, the narrative of um, the narrative of ETH being kind of ultrasound money was that eventually, post this transition to proof of stake and post the EIP 1559 upgrade, that certainly was going to be disinflationary and at times pretty deflationary. I mean, right now it is very deflationary, and a lot of it is because of the increased activity on the blockchain through meme coins.
Hmm.
So that is real, right? I mean, that's real money. That is real dollars and value accruing to the Ethereum blockchain. A good site for people who want to check it out on their own, go to ultrasound.money, and you can see exactly, how much ETH is being burned relative to what it would have been back when it was proof of work. I mean, it is multiple percentage points of a difference in terms of the lack of Ethereum supply as a result of this, and that's a big deal. The other thing is just sentiment, right? I mean, this is not unique to digital assets. You see this when AMC or Bed Bath and Beyond or GameStop are flying as well. What is that has trickle effects, right? One is it increases the excitement of stock trading and options trading. Two is it increases the activity on Reddit message boards. Three is it increases the volumes on Robinhood, which trickles into other stocks. The same thing is true here. When you see meme coins going crazy, yeah, it's a little weird, especially in a kind of a otherwise dull environment, but it does have those trickle down effects.
So one of the things I've been, well, two questions. Let me stay on this for one, because I seem to have always asked, and I get the question a lot about scalability of ETH and of Ethereum and gas prices, right? And I think there's always the view that these upgrades are supposed to bring gas prices down, make it more scalable. But it never, it didn't happen with the merge. It didn't happen with, the most recent upgrade. When is that? When is that? When and how is that supposed to happen? Or is it all, kind of built on the premise of side chains now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any of these individual events were supposed to take down fees immediately, right? They're steps in a transformation to a lower fee, higher transaction environment, right?
Hmm.
Um, if you look back to the 2021, crazy period for digital assets, a lot of it was at the expense of Ethereum, right? It was, oh my God, this is really taking off. Blockchain is real. Everybody's building, and Ethereum can't scale, and therefore that's why Solana and Avalanche and Phantom and at the time Luna and Near were all exploding, right? You had a real significant decrease in the market share of Ethereum transactions relative to other layer one blockchains. And then, of course, the flip side was in 2022 when everything slowed to a halt, and all of a sudden the narrative was, well, actually, if you think about layer one blockchains as, just what does a blockchain do? It sells block space, right? So when block space is in demand, and there's not enough of it on one chain, you would go to other chains, and that's what we saw in 2021. In 2022, it was the opposite. There was no demand for block space. As a result, Ethereum had plenty, and that's why you saw a real fallout of other chains, both in terms of price, but also more importantly in terms of just transactions and volume and apps being built on those, because there just wasn't there wasn't a need for excess block space, and that is really why these layer twos started to take off, because you had more time to basically fix and make the Ethereum blockchain better through these layer two side chains than you needed to come up with a competitor. So, we'll see what that means 5 or 10 years from now. But certainly the 2022 slowdown in the market was a benefit for Ethereum and Ethereum sidechains and a negative for other layer one blockchains. And if you do start to see demand for block space increase again, Ethereum and these layer twos will be better positioned to handle that increased volume and transactions and usage. So we'll see. As in most markets and in ecosystems, it does come down to supply and demand. If we get a huge uptick in demand for block space before you have the ability to handle that, then you will see gas prices going up again, and you will see alternative layer ones take off again. If it grows sort of at the same pace, you will steadily see gas prices going down and the Ethereum blockchain being able to handle, this amount of volume and transactions. And if we stay in kind of a dead period where there's just very little demand for block space, then it should ultimately, mean lower transaction costs as well.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I guess what we're seeing now is just kind of a near term temporary spike, as a result of what we just discussed. So, what the past few weeks have had, different guests on the show, who are founders and kind of building blockchain based businesses, and it's been interesting to hear kind of various real world use cases and applications and some, frankly, like pretty interesting conversations. Obviously, you're looking at it more from the investor in the ecosystem standpoint. But, as you speak to the other, counterparties, dealers, brokers, other fund managers, those that are still alive and in business, what are you guys talking about? Like, what are you hearing? What are people focused on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit back to the 2018, 2019, early 2020 days, which is trying to
Mm,
identify what are the themes and applications and narratives that are going to kind of take us to that next level. We take for granted now that there's been four real success stories in blockchain, short history, right? First was just Bitcoin and the ability to transact and send, a money-like instrument.
mhm.
Whether you believe in Bitcoin's future or not, I think 11 years later, we could certainly say it's a success as a $500 billion asset. That's pretty well known,
Yeah, of
globally.
course. Yep.
The second was DeFi, right? And that really kind of accelerated in starting in 2020, but really 2021, with
Hmm.
real, dexes and lend borrow platforms, and even, insurance and some asset management. The third was stablecoins. Don't we take it for granted now because it's 150 billion of stablecoins, and you hear the word stablecoin everywhere you go, including in Washington. But 2 years ago, the total AUM of stablecoins was like $3 billion, right? And it approached 200 billion 2 years later. So that's been a massive success. The idea of having U.S. dollar-based stablecoins across the world with seamless transactions. And then the fourth, of course, being NFTs, right? And whether you care about JPEGs or not, there's plenty of other aspects of the NFT market that is growing, right? I mean, an NFT really is just the ability to have your own kind of personalized on-chain identity or on-chain asset of anything, right? So those are four real themes, all of which were really 3 years ago, just sort of in seed kind of thought discussion stage, right? So we some people were more convicted than others on the future of those, but I don't think anybody thought all three of those would explode as fast as they did, in terms of usage and understanding and products and product market fit. So that's really what investors and fund managers and service providers are doing right now. They're trying to say, like, is AI going to matter when it comes to blockchain? Right? There's a couple of AI related tokens that have exploded higher this year, up 400 or 500%. Things like Render, but they're really, that one might be 3 to 10 years away. It might be 20 years away. So things like, is AI real on blockchain? Or is gaming going to finally take off? Right? I mean, you look at non-blockchain related gaming studios, right? It usually takes 3 to 5 years to get a good hit game out there, and a good 10 plus years to have a sustainable brand where you can continue to bring hit products. I mean, gaming on blockchain has been around for basically 3 years in any meaningful capacity. So we haven't even hit that stage yet of, like, should you have a hit game? So there's a lot of discussion on whether or not gaming and Web3 is going to really kind of hit that next milestone in the next couple of years. Will there be a real hit game that's sustainable and challenges the Fortnites and Robloxes in terms of users? There's certainly a lot of interest in social, right? Will there, especially with all the hiccups that Twitter has had over the last 12 months, right? Will there ever really be a Web3 decentralized social platform? So things like that. I think it's the kind of thing that 2 or 3 years from now we'll look back and say that was obvious because certainly somebody was talking about it. But I'm not sure that there's any real consensus or super high conviction on what the next real application or theme will be, that sort of takes the masses over the next couple of years.
Let me go back to AI because that's interesting. What is the thought or use case of AI on blockchain? Like, what does that mean in practical terms?
Um, there's a fair amount of what it could be. I mean, I mentioned Render, for example, right? I mean, that is literally like graphics and rendering faster graphics on games and other design type platforms. Some of that could be generative automatically, right? You don't need somebody necessarily designing that. That could be, you could spin up an idea and use something like Render or a competitor where you could potentially have an AI generated art or graphic put on top of that. Certainly in social, right? One of the things that, this is not specific to blockchain, but this is also,
But that's kind of what I'm curious because I understand applications of AI, right? But broadly speaking, but why? What is the significance of how it applies to blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it is yet. That's what I'm saying. I mean, these are
Oh, got it.
companies and projects. You go back 4 years ago when like Long Island Iced Tea changed their name to Long Island Blockchain Company or whatever, right? I mean, like people, you
Huh?
look at, you don't
I have
remember
no
that
idea
stuff?
what it.
There was a
No,
company.
long. What is Long Island iced tea besides the drink?
There was a public company that made the Long Island iced tea drink, and they changed their name to Long Island Blockchain or something like that because they were taking advantage of the blockchain boom in 2018, 2019, right? Or if you don't like that example, go look at a, if you go look at
So it's just a buzzword, basically.
yeah, it was a buzzword, right? Or go look at all the earnings transcripts over that time period, right, where everybody was mentioning blockchain even if
Sure.
they had no
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, yeah.
AI is something similar right now, where there's a lot of blockchain companies and crypto-related companies that are trying to figure out if AI can enhance what they're doing. It hasn't seen any success yet, but it's a buzzword, right? It's a project. So to your point, there is nothing tangible right now. I couldn't say like this is the biggest or most successful AI crypto company because it does not exist yet. But you're asking what are fund managers doing? They're trying to figure out, is this technology going to partner with
Got it.
blockchain and find a success story,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So what we really need then is just like a AI blockchain ESG play, and then we'd hit the triumvirate of narratives right there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think everybody, your buzzwords right now are AI, blockchain, and Little League baseball.
Good transition right
Yeah.
there. Yeah, no, and then in terms, look, I think the other thing we talked about that's picked up a little bit is just the regulatory angle, and it's certainly just you have Coinbase suing the SEC, you have um, you know uh, testimonies in front of House Financial Services Committee that are just becoming incredibly partisan that went on issues that really shouldn't be partisan, and it's I don't know why I would have had any optimism about anything different, knowing how politics works in this country. But it's incredibly disappointing that we can't kind of get our act together here. I know I read a headline today that House Financial Services Committee expects to have a blockchain bill introduced, and that's great. And I think on the margin that's a positive, but I don't think it's going anywhere this year. You still we're gonna default on debt ceiling right now. So it's like, no one's going to move this bill. So, maybe we get a new administration or anything like that. But right now, I think, you're starting to see everyone, really look at, overseas, and whether that's, physically moving headquarters or just, kind of launching and introducing new products like we're seeing with Coinbase and, even Gemini. It's not looking very US for the US, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely hurt the flow of funds into uh, digital assets over the last 6 months as well, right? I mean, I think um, that's the biggest real repercussion. I mean, everyone asks us about regulatory questions every day, right? And the answer is, we'll react to it when something actually happens, right? I mean, we get bombarded with headlines where nothing actually happens because it takes years, if not decades, to push some of this stuff through. So from an investing standpoint, we'll react when there's actually meaningful legislation. But what has had a near-term impact is the standstill of flows, right? I mean, I think everything from banks to brokerages to individual investors, they're not putting new money or time really into blockchain right now because of the fact that it's just pointless with a complete roadblock in Washington. But again, to your point, you're not seeing that around the rest of the world. You are seeing real meaningful teams and products and build out in Europe and in Asia, especially now in Hong Kong, as well as even in Africa and South America. So this is definitely a global industry. When you sit in the U.S., it is just head banging, right? It's frustration with regard to the lack of any progress and clarity. I do think from an investing standpoint, though, you have three pretty significant events that will happen this year, right? One is Grayscale versus the SEC. The other is, as you mentioned, Coinbase versus the SEC, and then the third one being Ripple. I don't think, from an investing standpoint, there's no real um, positive expectations here. It is just sort of, the beat down from Washington and from the regulators here in the U.S. has just been constant for 6 months, to the point where, law of diminishing returns. I mean, there's almost no regulatory headline right now that even moves markets because we have just become so immune to it.
Hmm.
I do think that the base case is that nothing will happen from Ripple, Grayscale, or Coinbase positively. But if for some reason you do get a positive ruling or positive judgment, or in the Ripple case specifically, who knows if this is actually going to get a summary judgment or if it's going to trial? Most
Yeah.
likely going to trial. Um, who knows if that becomes a jury of peers in a very complicated topic. That's a crapshoot in terms of how that's going to play out, right? So you could get a positive upside surprise at some point in the year in terms of some sort of a regulatory um, uh, uh, breakthrough from the courts. But otherwise, I think it's just a standstill right now, right? I think the
Yeah.
U.S. is certainly, I joke about it, like, congrats to the U.S. We're on the same list as North Korea, Cuba, and Iran in terms of the do not touch list. But I mean, that's what we are in terms of crypto. I mean, we are on that same list. You cannot transact in the U.S. In crypto, and business is going to other places.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I would be surprised if we saw rulings this calendar year on those, court cases. They just, always end up taking longer. But, and by then, who knows? We probably have a new administration and SEC chair. I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, but in the meantime, I mean, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about, like, where is the excitement, where's the progress, why was April so boring? I mean, sometimes boring is good, right? We have products now in blockchain that just work. They're not exciting anymore. They just work, right? Chainlink as an oracle just works. Uniswap as an exchange just works. DYDX as a derivatives exchange just works. Chiliz as a fan token exchange just works. Yeah, it's boring. These companies are so old; they've been around for 2 or 3 years now. But they just work. Aave, if you
Hmm.
want to borrow and lend, it just works. So we are definitely starting to see some of these quote unquote incumbents in the sort of DeFi and NFT and stablecoin world that just they're just boring parts of the economic society now, and you just use them and they work. So
Yeah, I think that's fair. Boring is not bad, right? It's better than, like I said, it's better than negative excitement. That doesn't really make sense, but I think you know what I'm saying.
yeah, for sure.
Um, so anyway, well, let's. Usually, a lot of times we lead with, the topic that everyone is really here for, which is youth athletics. But how's the baseball season going in Marina Del Rey?
Yeah, it's going a little well. I for one benefited from a slower April, being able to focus a little more attention on the kids. But yeah, the Delray American Little League. Both my daughter, 6 years old, and my son, 10 years old, both playing. My son's team started 0-4-1. They're now 9-5-1. So
Wow.
won 9 of our last 10, heading into the playoffs here. So it's been great. My son's getting a chance to catch a little bit. Normally he's on his club team, and for All Stars he's plays second base, but on this team he's been catching a lot and having a lot of fun. And my she's the youngest in the league and the only girl, and she's pitching, she's catching, she's smashing the ball. So it's been a lot of fun. The Dorman kids are definitely all over the baseball diamond this spring.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I don't have any baseball players anymore, as my son has moved on to different sports. But yeah, my youngest, Charlotte, we so she plays in for her rec league, which is WUSA, West U Softball Association. It's the largest softball league in the country. It's well over 1,000 girls, 6U through 14U, 12U, and we just started the playoffs, which is a double elimination tournament, and just for 8-year-olds, so girls who have a 2014 birthday, um, there are 17 teams of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a ton of girls, and yeah, we won our first round playoff game, and then we had our second round game last night. I've never seen anything like this. We were down after 2 innings, and there's a 4-run inning limit. We were down 8-1 after 2 innings. They had a girl. We had a girl hit a line drive to third base. The girl went to catch it with her glove, bounced off her glove, and then she caught it in between her legs, and just like crazy stuff like that. And yeah, we were down 8-1 after two, and we ended up winning in extra time 16-12.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was yeah, unbelievable game. Amazing game, and so they're 8-year-olds, right? So like at one point they were like, "What's the score?" I'm like, "Don't worry about the score." They're like, "What's the score?" I'm like, "Just go out and play next inning." They're like, "What is it?" And I'm like, "All right, it's 8-1." They were like, "Are we winning?" I'm like, "No, we're not winning." Like, how do you mean are we winning?
Well, I can tell you, I mean, you being in Texas and me here in California, the competition, I grew up in Ohio, and Ohio is pretty good sports, but it's nothing compared to what California and Texas is like. I mean,
Oh,
just the amount
it's
of players, the amount of talent, it is just crazy.
yeah,
I do have a question
it's
for you though.
nuts.
So my daughter, I mentioned my daughter's playing baseball. I think there's already like people asking like when is she going to transition to softball? First of all, why does
Hmm.
softball even exist? I mean, it's a super cool game, but like, why was when what is the history of softball? Why was that game created versus for girls and boys played baseball? It seems like they're pretty similar, and there's no real reason for the distinction. And two is, um, what is the right time to transition from baseball to softball if that's where your future is? Now that you've been doing this for
Um,
a couple of years.
Uh, so I've been doing softball for a while, yeah, because I have an older daughter too. I have I have no clue why they don't just play baseball and where softball came from. I mean, it's a totally different sport.
Totally
Like
different. It's super
they're
cool.
they're played on diamonds, but the rules are different. The biggest difference is pitching, right? Like
Mhm.
anyone can kind of go pitch a baseball if you can throw. Like you might not be good, but you can throw the ball and get it. Like pitching for softball, totally different motion, like
Mhm.
really tough skill. Um,
Much more natural motion too. You can throw way more crazy pitches softball than you can baseball because you're not putting any stress on your arm or your elbow or your.
yeah, natural in that regard, but it's like it's not natural in that like you can't just watch someone and you really
Right.
have to break it down, to learn how to pitch well. Um, and then so I don't know. I would imagine I don't know. It's probably interesting to look up. And then in terms of transitions, so what we typically see here is girls, some girls who start in baseball just don't want to play t-ball, right, in softball, and 6U, so like girls who are in kindergarten, pre-K, whatever, they could play 6U or like pixies, whatever they call it. And it's just kind of boring, like it's great for there's what is it, our 6U has 23 teams of 10.
Yeah.
It's insane. And there's and it's not like bat around like like Pee Wee is, but but they don't get outs. They hit off a tee. It's just kind of like whatever. Um, and so girls who are a little better and a little more athletic and whose parents are probably a little more you know don't want to play t-ball, we'll have them play little league baseball. And because I think they'll transition a little earlier. But um, but I would say once they hit 8U is probably a good time to transition to softball. Um, the next because I've seen girls make the transition at 12, and there you're like you have to learn too much. The swing is
Yeah.
totally different. The stance is different. Their fielding's usually great. Like they can throw and catch, and
Mhm.
and like that's always really impressive. But the swing is total. The stance is different. How you hold your
Yeah.
arms is different. The ball comes at you faster. There's pitches that girls throw like rising fastballs, which you just don't see
Yeah.
in baseball that are like super hard to hit. And so I would transition sooner rather than
Okay.
later.
Well, we'll keep your audience posted over the next 2 years on how we make that transition. So,
It will
um,
be, yeah. I think we'll have to do a follow-up episode in 2 years.
perfect. Well, good. Well, I wish you and your daughters and your teams a lot of success and fun this spring as it heats up.
Likewise, likewise. All right, Jeff. Well, good catching up. Talk again soon. I know you got to run to another interview, and we'll take it from there. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.